So we'll kick off our quick presentation. We're going to talk about elections in Missoula. Really, we're going to talk about voter registration for Voter Registration Day. We're going to talk about our ballot processing, what we do and what we have been doing for years on our system of checks and balances. We're going to talk about some of the additional integrity measures that we take in Missoula County and some that are used across the state. And then we'll finish this up with ways that you can be involved in the election process. So we'll go through this. It should take about 45 minutes, an hour at the most. We'll have you hold any questions that you might have. We'll have a little period at the end for you to be able to ask any questions. So on voter registration, these rules are governed by federal regulations and also National Voter Registration Act and the Help American Vote Act. In order to register to vote, you must be a U.S. citizen, you must be 18 years of age or older, and you must provide verifying information when you register to vote, such as like the last 4 digits of your Social Security or your driver's license or ID number. That's going to verify you that you are who you say you are. It's also critical that every voter registration form is signed. So for those of you who are here, we got some voter registration forms and we'll walk through them a little bit. And we'll start with those first 3 eligibility questions. In Montana, we're a self-affirming state, so you must check each of those different check boxes that you're a citizen, 18 years of age, and in Montana, you must be a resident for 30 days prior to the next election. One of Montana's election laws helps with this because you can register by mail up to 30 days ahead of the election, then you'd need to appear in person in those 29 days. On your voter registration, we need your name and your date of birth to help identify you as who you are. But if you live in a household where there might be a senior and a junior, it's so critical we get that information so that we can help differentiate that this is Bob Smith Sr. versus Bob Smith III. In addition to that, if you provide contact information, a phone number or an email, we will use this to reach out to you if there's ever a question about your ballot. And we'll talk about that in the future when we get to the section where we verify the signatures on your ballot when you vote by mail. So that verifying information we talked about earlier, in the state of Montana, we did a little bit of an update to our laws last year. And you need to provide either a driver's license or a state ID number when you register, or the last 4 of your Social Security. Now, if you don't have that, you can provide in alternate forms of ID. You can actually photocopy those or bring those in person to your elections office. If we don't get that verifying information, you will be considered registered, but you're going to be registered with a provisional status. What that means is we need to verify that information before your ballot will be counted. And there's 2 ways that that happens. If you're at the polling place, we'll ask you to verify that right when you show up to vote. We'll say, hey, it shows you're provisionally registered, and we can call in the office and verify this over the phone. If you're a vote-by-mail voter, you're going to get a pink form inside your ballot that says you must complete this information to verify before your ballot would be counted. And if for any reason you're not able to do so, you have till 5 p.m. the following day after the election to provide the information that was missing, verify, and have your ballot counted. Well, also, in addition to that verifying information, we're going to need to know where you live. And this needs to be a residential address or another geographic location. Remember, there's 3 requirements to be able to register to vote. You're a citizen, you're 18, and you've lived here for 30 days. Not that you have a home address that is a standard home address. So if you are experiencing homelessness, we can register you to vote, and we can use that geographic location. What this does is it provides you the unique set of items you get to vote on the ballot. So we'll need either that residence address or the geographic location. As we work our way down the form, you also have the opportunity to sign up as what we refer to as a UOCAVA voter, Uniformed Overseas Civilian Absentee Voting Act, UOCAVA. Rolls right off the tongue, right? This is for active military members, their family, along with citizens residing overseas. So you will get special permissions. You can receive your ballot via email. You can receive your ballot in the mail 45 days ahead of the election. And in Missoula County, we also dedicate 1 staff person to directly work with those people whom are overseas. So you'll get that direct contact from our staff. This is your ballot. Yes, it's been received and will be counted on election day. We also want to know your previous registration information. We'll talk about it more as we go through this presentation. In Montana, we use a statewide voter database. But your previous information is so critical to helping clear up voter lists between states. So if you write down that your previous county and state was Gallatin County, Bozeman, Montana, we're going to find you in the voter database and move you from Gallatin to here. But if your previous registration was in Arizona and you've moved to Montana, we'll use this information and our Secretary of State will compile a list of all of those voters who've moved from another state and coordinate with that Secretary of State to clean up those lists. It's critical that we're doing this ahead of the election to help make sure that we have clean voter rolls. So in addition to that, you can vote by mail and sign up to vote by mail in the state of Montana. We've been no excuse. And since 2017, it has been permanent, unless on a yearly basis, the address you have on file with our office doesn't match the address on file with the post office. If that happens, we're going to reach out to you, let you know, and we're going to send you 2 communications before we remove you from that list. Now, the last thing is we need to have that signature. We talked about it a little bit before. Your 3 requirements are 18 years of age, citizen of the United States, and a resident for 30 days. How do we know? Well, we're going to check each of those check boxes, and signing this affirmation means that you agree that you meet all of those requirements. In Montana, we're what we refer to as a self-affirming state. So in our office, when we receive that form, if any of those boxes are missed, we're going to notify that voter that they're not eligible due to that not being checked. If it's not signed, we're going to let them know that it's pending, it's not been completed. And once that's signed, it's the voter stating that they know, understand those rules, and they meet those rules. In addition to that, we're going to keep this signature, and we're going to use this signature to verify any signatures on mail-in ballots. We'll talk about that as we get through our ballot processing area. So that's your voter registration form. How do you cancel your voter registration? Well, we mentioned it earlier. So if we receive a notice from that Secretary of State that you've moved to another state and need to be pulled off of that list, you can be canceled. A voter can send us confirmation to cancel their registration in writing. So anything that has that written request that comes through. If we receive a death certificate through the Department of Health and Human Services, in Missoula County, every single day we're looking at obituaries for locally registered voters. We're utilizing those obituaries as a documentation, and we're canceling those voters on a daily basis to help ensure that our voter rolls are updated. In addition to that, you can have a court order declaring you mentally incompetent or ineligible to vote. If you are a felon and you're currently serving time in a penal institution, you're not eligible to vote. And that's critical. Every state's laws differ, but in Montana, you must be currently serving time in a penal institution for a felony conviction. When you've been released, you're able to become a voter again. Then we talked about it a little bit with that address not matching what's on file. If that happens, we're going to send you confirmations. If we don't hear back from you, you're going to be moved to an inactive status. An inactive voter can appear at the polling place. They can get a ballot on election day, but they're not automatically sent a ballot. And if they miss 2 federal general elections, they're moved from an inactive status to a canceled status. All of this is done within the statewide voter database. So we can see those voters, and they're not purged out or deleted. They're an active voter, they're an inactive voter, or they're a canceled voter. So that we can bring, if that voter moves back to the state of Montana, we can bring that voter registration back up and have all of that same voting history from before. We get this all the time. Hey, I just wanted to call and cancel my registration. I received another notice for jury duty. So much so I wanted to plug it in here. You're going to get half of your jury duty pool from voter registration. The other half comes directly from the list of driver's licenses. So I'm always going to encourage somebody who calls our office, please don't cancel just for that reason, because you may still be selected through your driver's license. But if you send us that written notice, we will make sure that you have your will met. After the jury duty, the last area is that power of attorney doesn't have any bearing on elections. We don't use power of attorney for elections. There are rare circumstances where it does apply for overseas voters. But what we have is if you are a voter who's not able to complete a signature, you can have a designated agent, and there's a special process for that, where that designated agent can register and sign on your behalf, sign your ballot, even go as far as canceling that voter registration. But there's a specific process, and you'd want to reach out to our office if you were interested in that. That's my quick update about our voter registration form and the requirements on there. Next, I want to talk about all of our different ballot processing, and this is really where we dig in deeper into those checks and balances. We talked about the fact you need to verify your information. We talked about the fact we'll pull you off of other states' lists if you list it on there. And we use one statewide voter database to help ensure that we don't have duplicate registrations. But then we want to talk about the ballots themselves. And we issue ballots in two fashions. At the polling place on election day, and this is pretty straightforward. You appear at the polling place, you'll come up to your registered judge, you'll be asked to see an ID. This is important. There are new laws for the IDs that are acceptable in the state of Montana, so it must be one of the 6 approved IDs. Driver's license, state ID, tribal ID, military ID, concealed carry permit, passport. Those are your main items that you're able to use. If you don't have one of those, you could use any other photo ID. This could be your Costco card that has your picture on the back. This could be your model airplane builder club card if it's got your picture on it. Any photo ID with your name and your photo, plus supporting documentation that has your name and current address. Good examples of this are bank statements, bills, car vehicle registrations are something we use on a regular basis at the polling place. So you must show either those 6 IDs or one combination of those others. Then they're asked to state their name aloud, and it's done loud enough that any poll watchers in there could hear this, and then they would sign that register. What that does is it creates a list that, yes, I've prepared, I've come, I've shown my ID, and I've made sure that it's publicly known that I'm voting in here. For a vote by mail, so in Missoula, all of our school and most of our municipal elections are done by mail ballot. Vote by mail and absentee voting are the same. It just depends on whether or not everybody's receiving it or just those who've requested it. You have to be eligible. So we talked about those inactive voters, those people whose address didn't match and we missed some communication. You can appear at a polling place, but you're not automatically sent a ballot. Only the active and those provisionally registered, those people who may have had a typo in their social security number. You're going to get mailed a ballot, and it's going to come 25 days before a federal or 20 days between a local or municipal school election. Since we can't check that ID, your signature is your ID. And in Missoula County, we go a step above and beyond other counties. We have a flap that helps cover that. And so when we get those in, we'll talk about that signature verification process and that flap that we get. But we send out a ballot to every eligible voter, and then they'll vote it, return it, prepaid postage in Missoula County on all ballots, and then that signature is going to be your form of ID. So I want to talk about some of the steps after we've issued you a ballot to processing and counting them, and this will be specific towards absentee ballots. We follow through 3 main steps before we start opening your ballot to count. Receiving your ballot in and scanning it into that statewide voter database. Signature verification, checking that signature against what's on file to make sure that you were the person who voted that ballot. And then reconciliation, going through a process of comparing every ballot that we have received to the number of ballots that we have opened, prepared for counted, and then counted on election day. That reconciliation is critical to helping make sure that we know that there were no additional ballots counted or any ballots missed in the election. Then the final process we do is we're going to open that secrecy envelope and prepare that for counting. That process can take place as early as the Thursday before the election, and we'll refer to that as ballot opening. We used to refer to it as our sequestered board because they were required to be in the building until the close of polls, but laws have since changed. So receipting. Every day of the week, we're first at the post office. We're greeting them there in the morning. We have 2 election judges go pick them up and bring them back in so that we can scan those into the system, and they're tracked by that source they're received. Through the mail from the post office, in person here at our office, at a ballot drop-off location, or through interoffice mail, whatever way they may have been received. They're going to be sorted into bins based off of their style. So we talked about this earlier. That residential address gives you your unique set of things you get to vote on, and we're going to sort them by which items you get to vote on so that we can track those ballots easier. Then we're going to open that outer mailing. In Missoula County, we're the only county in Montana that uses a flap to cover that signature. In a mail ballot election, that signature is your ID. And so while we spend a little extra money on those, we have that added security for our voters. So we're going to open the top and remove that flap off so we can expose that signature. You'll see that quick image of your ID and what the information printed on there is. All of our voters and our ballots in the state of Montana are tracked through the voter database. That barcode's critical because when we scan that in, that records it into the system and states that this is a valid ballot for this voter and you should check this signature. Now, if a voter moves or chooses to vote in person, they've already been issued a ballot, the system will require you to void that previous ballot before one can be issued. And we'll see this happen. Next week, we're going to start preparing ballots to go out in the mail. Ballots will mail on October 14th. And in order to get this whole process started, you may have submitted and we prepared a ballot packet, and then you moved. So we're going to void that first ballot, issue you a second ballot, and due to the statewide voter database, that first ballot is voided. There's no way to accept two ballots from a voter in that election. So that's our verification. So we're going to scan each of these unique barcodes in. The other thing this does is it shows you when you go to My Voter page that your ballot has been accepted or your ballot has been received, so you can see the status of that ballot. And that's why we go out of our way to meet the postmaster at 7:30 in the morning to make sure we can get them all scanned in, so the next day that we've received them, you can check and confirm online. So the next item we need to do is check the signature. We've receipted them in, we group them into a batch of 25 so that they're easier to process, and then we verify the signature on each ballot off of the signatures in the database. So every envelope signature is going to be compared with what is recorded in there. This is where we might reject a ballot. And I want to talk about that because a rejected ballot is not the end of this ballot's process. So we might reject a ballot for three main reasons: a signature mismatched, not signed, completely missing the signature, and the last reason is not signature related at all. It's that we have received it on the 9th of November. And in Montana, it must be received by 8 p.m. on election day. So when we go through there, we're comparing the signatures of what's on file to the voter database, and this is our rule that covers signature verification. So Administrative Rule 44.3.216 covers it all, and to sum it up, it is, was the election worker reviewing that signature confident that it was the voter signing? Were there significant similarities that they felt confident that the voter signed that ballot? That's our ultimate goal. And since we have humans doing this process on every ballot, one person may see it differently than another person, so we're going to have multiple sets of eyes if there's ever a question, and it's always best to err on the side of caution. This is an example of each of the signatures of one of our previous elections administrators. Every one of these is scanned directly out of the voter database, so we have copies. In Missoula, we see a lot of different signatures, and we see two main things. My signature when I moved here was perfect cursive. You could read every single letter, it was flourished, it was great, and it got shortened. As I signed more and more, it went from perfect cursive to B scribble scribble. What we also see is the opposite. We'll see signature degradation. We've got voter signatures on file back since we started scanning them into the system in 2005. Voters may have a stroke, may have a drastic change to their signature. Voters may just age and get a little bit shakier. And we're able to reach out to those voters and communicate with them, and anytime they fill out a form, we can send them a signature update form. As a matter of fact, a signature update is one of the check boxes on the top of your voter registration form. So we talked about it. It's not the end of the life of the ballot. If for any reason we need to reject that, we're going to notify that voter. So if that signature didn't match what's on file, or the signature was missing, we're going to reach out and we're going to let you know that there is still the opportunity to resolve that. You can fill out the form we mail out to you with the appropriate ID and send that back in. You can come to our office, or we can have you go through this process up until 5 p.m. on the day after the election. So any of these rejected ballots become treated as a provisional ballot. So there's additional time to respond. What that means is on election night at midnight, we may be calling you. Excuse me, sir, you forgot to sign your ballot. We're going to hold on to this, make sure every vote is important. You can come in till 5 p.m. to make sure that we have a signature on that ballot. But we're going to reach out, we're going to handle and contact those voters if we feel that there is potential fraud, which is much different than a rejected ballot. The number one reason in Missoula County we reject a ballot is what we refer to as a household swap. Two people in the household received the same ballots, likely voted them the same day, and one partner signed the other partner's ballot. That is not necessarily fraud, but if there is any caution of fraud, Any voter or our office will work with the county attorney and commissioner of political practices to report this and follow through on those processes. So we talked about it, registering to vote, the information you need, sending ballots, receiving them in, signature verification. The next step, and one of the longest steps because it's so important, is reconciliation. After we go through that voter database, we print a report. This is every envelope that we have signature verified off of that report. And working in teams of 2, that envelope and ballot is confirmed to that report. So not only did we receive it in, check that signature, then we double check that yes, that physical ballot is present, listed on the report, and matches the reports from the database. After we verify that report and mark off every one of those forms, the envelope, that blue secrecy envelope, is going to be removed from the affirmation envelope. And then it's going to have those affirmation envelopes sorted. Did you try to make a change to your address? Or is it postage applied? Is it just a regular affirmation envelope? They're all placed on a spindle. In Missoula County, all of our ballot envelopes have a hole drilled on them and a spindle. That way we can ensure that every single envelope is empty. The report of every single ballot we received in, the affirmation envelopes and the secrecy envelopes, are bundled together until the next step of the process. That next step of the process is going to be opening. So when we receive them in, we signature verify as quickly as possible so that voters can know that their ballot has been accepted. Then we combine those ballots. We'll do a large-scale flow of receiving them in, reconciliation, and tracking those. Starting the Thursday before the election, we can open those secrecy envelopes and prepare them for tabulation. 85% of the active voters in Missoula County vote by mail. We are running 2 elections at the same time, an incredibly large-scale vote-by-mail election and an incredibly large-scale polling place election. We need to start preparing those ballots on the Thursday beforehand so that we can start counting them as soon as possible and get you the most accurate and complete election results as possible by the close of polls on Election Day. So, we're going to be in teams of 2. The judges are going to count those blue secrecy envelopes. Yes, I have 25. It matches the report. Then they're going to open them and confirm that there's only one ballot. In primary elections, oftentimes we'll see voters vote both a Democratic Party ballot and a Republican Party ballot. If there are votes on both ballots and we can't determine the voter's intent, we must void that ballot and track it through the system. As we go through here, we also need to check in this election, is it the general election ballot? Is it earlier this year's school election or primary election ballot? If a voter returns the wrong elections ballot inside that secrecy envelope, we're going to have it recorded as accepted in the database, and we need to show on paper why we didn't count that ballot. So once again, we're going to use pre-drilled holes and spindles to make sure that they're all empty. And after we complete that process, all of our ballots are stored in a locked room, regardless of where they're at in that process. They're under video surveillance. And then once they've completed those steps of going through and being removed from the affirmation, then they are sealed. And then we will open those seals and process them as they go through. Whenever ballots are transported from one location to another, it's done with 2 election judges, and we will have an accompanying seal log. And this is important. We retain ballots. Ballots are the official record of the election. And in a federal election, they're kept for at least 22 months, and in a local election, they're kept for at least 12 months. As we go through this, we've got one process left, and that's counting your ballot to make sure that your votes can be tabulated and reported. The Monday before the election, we're going to go through and we are going to operate our tabulators. These are our high-speed processors. In Missoula County, all of our ballots are counted here. Even our polling place ballots are reconciled at that polling place and then brought here to be tabulated. So we've got those tabulators operators, runners who are bringing packets of ballots with that accompanying pink form or other colored form to track them through that process. We've got an observers who help make sure that each step in the process is being followed. We'll have a resolution board. So any ballot that can't be read by that machine is going to go to a board of 3 individuals, all humans, to determine, can we determine that voter's intent? And if so, they will duplicate a new ballot to make sure that the way you intended to vote is the way that that ballot was counted. We'll also have a write-in board if there are qualified write-in candidates. For this election in November, there are no qualified write-in candidates at the state level nor at the Missoula County level. If you mark in a write-in candidate in November, Your ballot will be tabulated as write-in, regardless of whose name is written on that line. So that's our counting center and our ballot processing. At the end of this, we go back through and we take our vote totals, we compare them to those reconciliation reports, those reports generated by the machine, and we make sure that the election balanced. I want to talk about some of the other integrity measures that we use to keep elections safe and secure. Provisional ballots, observation, our public tours, our canvass process, and then the public process of contesting an election and that records retention. If a voter has the opportunity to cast another ballot or needs that information verified, they will receive a provisional ballot. And what does that mean, an opportunity to cast the number one ballot? Well, the number one reason is you've showed up at your polling place and that voter was issued an absentee ballot. So since they have the opportunity to vote that absentee ballot, if they appear at the polling place, they're going to vote a provisional, and we're going to confirm that absentee hasn't been received. If there's an ID issue that needs to be resolved, they can vote that provisional ballot, and that ID issue will be resolved before that ballot is counted. We'll verify any information necessary on those provisional ballots, and then they're added to that vote total the Monday after the election. In a close election, this could be the difference between the winner and the loser. As an additional integrity measure, in Missoula County, every single portion of our practice is open to public observation. So we can allow you to do anything and see anything that we're doing as long as there is not a state law that we would be violating. Staff always work in teams of 2 to ensure additional accountability, and the processes are open to the public as well as under video surveillance. Standard video surveillance on all of our surveillance footage is a 30-day retention period. After the election, we have to go through the additional process of canvassing the election, which would be within that 30 days. Public tours. It's great to say we're open to the public, we're transparent, but it's nice to formalize that process. So in addition to being able to come at any point in time to learn about elections, we have a slate of 7 public tours. I had to count them really quick for you, which will go through the critical processes, starting with preparing these ballots to go out in the mail on October 5th, through to our final election canvass, making sure that all of our ballots that we have marked and reported are accurate and accounted for, that nothing was missed or counted more than once. As we go through this, these tours will let you see the practices that I've been discussing happen live. They've been scheduled for a time where we know that this will be taking place to help make sure that when you come, you can see what you're interested in seeing. Nothing's worse than getting somebody who wants to observe to come in the door and say, I want to watch you counting those ballots, and we have to say, well, we're not going to start counting until the Monday before the election, but you're welcome to come at 9 a.m. when we get started. Post-election audit. This is critical. What we do is we're going to go through and we're going to test our machines before the election. We're going to test our machines on election day, and then after the election, we're going to verify that they worked correctly. So there will be a random selection of 3 precincts at the state level, and we're going to physically count those ballots, and we're going to confirm on 3 different races from those 3 precincts that what the machines reported match what we had reported. This is critical. We've heard a lot of malicious information around machines being hacked. In Montana, we have been a paper ballot state, and we have had post-election audits to confirm that machines work correctly. As we go through this, the canvass. We also have an independent board. This would be the elected officials, our county commissioners. They're going to check my work. I don't sign my own checks here. We go through this process and we present the information to an independent board which confirms machine totals have all been added up, that all of the accepted ballots are accounted for, and that there are no discrepancies. They will have the option to certify the election, request a recount, or inspect those physical ballots. Then, in a federal election, it happens again. We send this information to the Secretary of State, where they compile and audit all of these different canvasses to make sure that all of this information aligns again. These critical measures are what we use to feel so confident in our process. But in addition to us feeling confident about the process, there is a clear path for the public to participate if there's ever a discrepancy. We're going to store those materials for 22 months to allow time for anybody to file a legal challenge or request and review those records. Montana Code Annotated lays out the process. Any eligible elector can contest another elector's eligibility to vote. They can also go through and they can contest the results of an election. In Montana, we heard that there were wide discrepancies in the state of Montana, and we said, if there are any discrepancies or you believe the information you're reporting to be true, this is the process you follow to contest this election. Nobody followed through to contest the election. And so we have a process, we have clear records, we have public participation, and all of these measures help align to make sure that we have a clear plan to make sure our elections are safe, have checks and balances, and make sure that each section of our election has another representative checking it or a member of the public who can do so. Supporting elections. We've got three main ways that you can help support elections. Serving as an election judge, and I'll give you a quick heads up. Don't call our office in the morning because as we've gone through this process, what we have seen is that all of our training has to take place in February and March ahead of the primary election. So if you do contact our office, we'll get you on the list for the next time we run it. Serving as an aide or assistant. The aides and assistants are the people we were talking about who do the signature verification, who do the ballot preparation, who help us make sure that every ballot is accounted for, and also our election advisory committee. So we're going to recruit and train judges even-numbered years, 27 polling locations, the biggest in the state of Montana. So we need to recruit almost 800 election workers. We had an incredibly successful recruitment period this spring, and we're working to help continue this forward and establish it for the next cycle. Training's held in February and March. We also need dedicated managers, people responsible for the seal logs and security in that polling place. When we gear up to run our next recruitment, we will have a large-scale recruitment process that covers through online, in person, through news media. Every elected official will know, as well as each of the people who've completed this process in the past. Our election aides and assistants, they also are the people who serve here for late and same-day registration. There are still some minor instances of same-day voter registration that voters can sign up to serve with, but there'll be those great people offering that excellent customer service. Then our election advisory committee. Our advisory committee works and helps serve to advise us as the elections office about different ways and methods that we can do to help proceed. Elections advisory committee was critical when we were working to establish should we be a central count or a precinct level count county. And next year as we enter into redistricting, they will be critical to helping us with establishing polling locations and precincts. You can find out more online at Missoula Votes under the Election Advisory Committee section. And I'm just coming up to my last section in here, so I wanted to give a big thank you to those of you who came here in person, those of you who are online, and an extra big thank you to Missoula Community Access Television, who will be recording this presentation so we can present it in the future and has helped us live stream it to everyone out there.